In a world where Wizards of the Coast seem to forget that Australia and South America and other parts of the world can exist at all, Ravensburger, who control Lorcana, have actually put on a large event in Australia. Unfortunately, said large event, which has invites to the World Tour, I think it's called, for Lorcana, and Golden Mickeys on the line, was marred with controversy this weekend. Shout out to Rose Bloom Nixie on my Discord for tagging me about this in the Am I the Asshole channel, with her trying to explain it to me. I'll be honest, I got very lost in this explainer. But after watching a bit of the Twitch stream and reading about it on the subreddit, I think I get the grasp of it now. And the short answer is yes, the player in question is an asshole. So why is this interesting to make a video about? Well, there's a few reasons really. One, I want to go through what the angle shooting and the cheat was. It's not very clever. It's mainly just an example of someone being a sweaty little rules shark. And also abusing the fact that the rules have changed and the judge at the table didn't know that. Beyond that, I think it's also an interesting point from the community standpoint because, like I opened the video with, some games companies are struggling or just not willing to put events on in Australia. So for there to be a Melbourne DLC, a Disney Lorcana, is it Cup? Challenge, sorry. Lorcana's evidently a game I've played, but is not even close to being my primary game. But a Disney Lorcana challenge in Australia with invites to the Worlds is actually quite impressive and something that we should be excited for and applaud games companies for doing. Further to that, there's even more community conversation around the fact that a lot of people attending this event have never really played Lorcana before. They were collectors or played a little bit casually at home and were then attending an event with a large competitive tournament attached to it. All of this leads to things like this being even worse than they are around the card games. I'll go into more of that in the second half of the video. The event had full Twitch coverage, as you can see here. On the left, we have Jesse Lentini playing a colour combination that I don't know the name of, but it involves magic brooms, which is a card that I do know. And Clement Foussard is playing the red-blue deck on the right here. Clement appears to be a French player who's travelled all the way to Australia to play in this thing. So they are very keen to win, shall we say. I'm going to explain the angle shoot, bordering on cheat if I'm completely honest, in terms that will be usable for both Magic players, because that's my main audience, but also anyone who plays any basic card games. If you're looking to pick up Disney Lorcana cards, you can get them from CoolStuffInc.com in the North American Peninsula using the code KENOBI at checkout to get 5% off your order and it helps support the show. If you're buying in Europe, you can get them from magicmadhouse.co.uk. Again, use my code to get 5% off your order and it helps to support the show, and it's free shipping on orders over £30. So in essence, what happens is there's a missed trigger that ends up changing the outcome of the game, giving the player who spots it huge amounts of tempo, and they go on to win, go into the top 2, win a Golden Mickey, which is worth some money. I don't even know. I googled Golden Mickeys at first. Some are £1,000, some are 10 grand. I'm not sure if there's various different versions of Golden Mickeys. Tell me in the comment section below. But also, although the player, we're talking about Clement Foussard here, got into the top 2 and lost, they still get an invite to Worlds at Disney World. So they've got their invite through this too. The reason I'm giving this context is that this angle shoot had an absolutely dramatic effect on the outcome of the tournament, the prizing, who got what. It's pretty dramatic. Simply put, Clement Foussard is behind on board, cards in hand, and in the race to 20 lore. Really simply, you turn your creatures sideways to accumulate lore, which allows you to win the game up to 20, where in Magic you turn them sideways to attack your opponent and reduce them from 20. It's a very similar, with some nuances, but similar system. Clement is on the back foot, but does have a powerful card in play, a shark that benefits from the opponent having a tapped creature it can attack. That will become important in a moment. Jesse plays a goat. The goat has an enters a battlefield trigger that gives them 1 questing point, and then there's a further trigger on the broom that says when you play a creature you can sack it and draw a card. Jesse plays the goat, goes to his notepad to mark up his lore counter towards the winning 20, and then after putting his pen down decides to try and pick up his broom to sack it to draw a card. 2 different triggers that would have went on the stack, or in Lorcana terms, into a bag. As you see, Clement stops him and calls a judge, and we have to cut to the commentary team talking through the ins and outs of the matchup whilst the judge call's being resolved. In essence, much like in Magic you put things on the stack and then resolve them, in Lorcana you put them into a bag, and at some point in the past, from my understanding of reading on Reddit, the older rules enforcement document said that if you did not announce putting them into the bag, they didn't go into the bag. You've missed the trigger. However, that's not the case anymore. Clement calls a judge, and when we return to the match, it's been ruled that the broom is not sacked and they cannot draw the card. But on the current board, like I said, that's a lot worse. Not only does Jesse not get to sack this body and draw a card into his his hand to give him more fuel, but now there's a tapped creature that had quested or attacked earlier, and in Lorcana you can attack opponent's creatures, and in the case of this shark, whenever this character challenges another character, you may return an action card from your discard to your hand. So you can get back a spell, a sorcery if you will, an action card that does something, in this case I think some card draw, because the opponent has a tapped creature. It's absolutely beneficial that the broom is still in play, and thus the angle shoot is not just to stop the card draw, but to give Maui half shark a valid target. The reason I'm labouring this point is because earlier in the match, around 32 minutes earlier, we see the exact same interaction happen. A creature enters the battlefield, it triggers a lore gaining ability, it is marked down by Jesse, and the broom is picked up. And bearing in mind it takes around 5 seconds longer for Jesse to actually do the physical actions, so it's not about speed or anything like that, even though that's not part of the rules as far as I understand it either. But the difference in this circumstance is that a body not being on the board that can continue to quest is potentially arguable because there's a card draw involved, but potentially advantageous to Clement. When we jump forward 30 minutes into game 3 of their 5-set match, from the looks of things, Clement is on the back foot, has a creature with an on attack of another character trigger that needs a tapped creature. He sees the opportunity. This creature is tapped, and he decides to do this weird thing where he calls a judge and claims Jesse has missed the trigger. But we've already seen in the same set of matches against the same opponent with the same decks that it was okay to do earlier, but it isn't now. The only changing factor is being on the back foot and having the fucking shark. The irony being that he's raw sharking his opponent in theory, and he's playing with a shark. You can't make this up. He actually goes on to draw some cards off of the card that he casts, and he draws some sort of cheetah from like Lion King or something, and I heard the announcers say,
looks like we've got a vicious cheetah and a popsicle in hand. Looks like we've got a vicious cheetah. Looks like we've got a vicious cheetah. And
I was like, are we not aware of what's happening here? Sharks and cheetahs in the deck of the opponent who's doing the sharking? Something I need to clarify is that there is no audio from the players during the match. We don't know the exact words that were said, but it has been confirmed to me by someone who claims to be local to one of the players involved as to what happened, the exact the fact that there's an angle shoot around bags and trigger tracking. And don't just take it from me, reading Twitch chat as this got resolved is quite funny. People saying about sharking and they can't believe it and they need to riot. Like, everyone in Twitch chat is in disarray and shock this is happening. Further to that, there is also uncorroborated accounts of this player being a cheater in the past, but again, this happens every time someone cheats in Magic too. There's no receipts being presented on Reddit or Twitter that I can see, so I'm not going to stand by that. I'm just going to at least reference the fact that people are saying it, but it's kind of a phenomenon we always see when someone cheats or sharks like this. Now, if you go to the subreddit and read the account of the judges that were there and other judges who judged Lorcana and so on, they all do talk about how this isn't actually how this should have been ruled. There was a mistake made. The broom should have still got the trigger because, like I said, the rules have been changed. You don't have to announce the triggers on the stack. The announcements that are coming off and resolving in terms of the order you do them. So in essence, we had a judge call for a thing that had already happened in the match to have it happen differently. The judge ruled in favor of the player doing the angle shoot. They got what they wanted, got the advantage out of it, got the tempo gain out of it, and got back into the match and won, and went on to play the finals and get an invite to the Worlds event at Disney World. That's pretty bad. Now, if we unpack the rest of the event a little bit, there's a lot of complaints about cheating in the main competitive event. Now, I'm going to contrast that with Instagram reels that I read this morning and some YouTube videos and such of people who went along to collect, see artists, and do the more casual side of things, absolutely loving it. They just loved an event based around the card game they like. So we're seeing that the competitive side of things was not happy and the more casual thing was. And I think you really need to line these two up, otherwise you're going to have a conflicting through line through your community and your game. Some of the stories are pretty wild, so I'm going to talk about some unverifiable things here, just anecdotal stuff. One person caught their opponent drawing too many cards from a card draw spell, told the judge. The judge said they would figure out what the infraction would be for game 2 because of the actual cards drawn when the opponent admitted to it, but to begin game 3. Then upon beginning game 3, they were told that they would have been rewarded a win against the cheater, but because they started game 3, which they were told to do by a judge, they can't do that now, resulting in that player getting a draw. 1 win, 1 loss, and I guess they didn't get to play the final match to time. I don't know. Sounds messy. There was apparently someone spotted literally stacking their deck between rounds. They were told they couldn't do this and need to shuffle sufficiently, and that was it. Now, there might be some leniency because the game is new and fresh, and there is a more casual contingent coming into it. Lorcana attracts an interesting, cross-section of the card game community. On one side, there are your casual, younger crowd. There's a higher percentage of women playing who've not played card games before. Not that not all women have played card games, games, but you know what I mean. Oh god, I'm gonna get cancelled for that. Only joking, cancel culture doesn't exist. It's just consequences for being a dickhead. But on top of that, you've got players who no longer play Magic the Gathering because of the changes to organized play there, or Yu-Gi-Oh! Or other card games, so they don't like the direction the game has gone, and they've moved across to Lorcana as a competitive game of choice. In many ways, Lorcana and Flesh and Blood share an element of the refugees from other card games, maybe not the correct term, the people who've abandoned other card games or moved away from them, or joined this in addition to get more of a competitive fix. There is also, again, this is anecdotal and cannot be proven, I don't know how much I agree with it, maybe I do a little bit, but there's this anecdotal idea that Lorcana is softer than Flesh and Blood. Flesh and Blood is this much more hard and rigid game that attracts the, your traditionalist TCG grinders, where Lorcana, you can walk up to your local events and smash kids and newbies and people who are a lot greener in these card game spaces. So with that all in mind, I think it's really fucking important that whether it be Ravensburger, or the tournament organizers of this event specifically, I guess Disney maybe, need to get on top of this shit and not have it be so fucking bad at the top end of your game. The subreddit is full of memes of Clement Voussard being a cheetah, angle shooter, or shark. That's not a good place to have your game right now. People have traveled quite far to try and get involved with these things. And when there's money and placements on the line for larger events, you've got to get your shit in order. One of the other anecdotal things from the event weekend is that supposedly some of the judges were card game judges of other games, Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh! It's not really clear what the anecdotal suggestions were, but the point is that they haven't got enough Lorcana experience. And I guess whilst that's something they can fix over time, that's kind of to be expected, right? The game is newer, and thus there will be a smaller pool of talent or experienced players or experienced judges. And of course, the whole thing hinges on an incorrect judge call, which, sure, again, you could ask for the judges to be more experienced. I guess the ones at the top 8 tables should be very well versed in the current rules documentation and shouldn't lead to someone getting an invite to fucking Disney World because you didn't know the rules in and out. Like I said, there's an expectation that there's a smaller pool of people, but to be honest, the smaller pool should be used for that top 8. And this is one of the problems that we face with events in certain parts of the world where there is a smaller community or a more spread out community, like we get with Australia and South America, or at least that's what the line that gets fed to us a little bit about games companies ignoring those spaces. There's this really funny through line of the commentary on the subreddit of, I say this, it's funny, I'm not trying to lessen your experiences or take the piss out of the community. I think the idea you've got is the right one, is that you want Ravensburger or higher up perhaps even to take accountability and train your judges better and support them with better tools, funding and so on. The problem is, as someone quite entrenched in Magic, I'm going to warn you right now, that isn't the best course of action. Wizards decided that at the point that the line between employee and freelancer started to blur with the judge program, they cut ties. And ever since then, we've had so many problems with judges academies and judge programs actually working or being reliable. What I'm saying is, be careful what you wish for, because Ravensburger or Disney might realize that it's just not worth the hassle to support this judge program, and thus that could have a knock-on effect of them supporting less organized play, or organized play continuing to be a fucking shambles. But from the looks of things, it already is a little bit of a shambles. I am not taking enjoyment in another card game having problems, not at all. I actually love seeing other card games thrive because it makes a stark difference from the 90s where every card game just died, right? It's wonderful to see Flesh and Blood and Altered and Sorcery and Lorcana and Star Wars Unlimited come and grow and create communities in local spaces and abroad and have events. If anything, it just widens the industry and grows card games as a hobby. So please don't think I'm using this to just laugh at the pitiful state of what sounds like the event ended up being. You've got to get those casuals coming back as well. They don't want to play against people who are going to fucking angle shoot them on some dumb shit about whether you can put your magic broom or your goat in the same bag. Come on, man, what the fuck are we doing here? I think from playing a lot of Warhammer recently, I've become a lot softer in terms of how I communicate with my opponents and play competitive games. Warhammer, if you don't know, is a game of no hidden information. There's no hidden cards in hand usually, or hidden rules. You have to quite openly volunteer stuff to your opponents, otherwise the game just doesn't work. And what that's led me to be is just caring about sportsmanship and communication with my opponent far more than I ever did in Magic, because Magic kind of works even if you don't speak the same language as your opponent. And thus, I like to explain things to my opponent and ask if they understand things and just try and get a good game out of it. I do think that playing within the rules of the game is important, but I also think just winning because your opponent didn't understand the fucking subtle nuances of stacking triggers into a bag and a fucking metaphorical like chain link or some shit is absurd. You are a shit player and a shit person if that's what you have to resort to win your fucking games of Disney's Lorcana. And let's just focus in on that for a second, right? I'm not saying that Lorcana is any less admirable as a pursuit than any other card game. They're all fucking card games at the end of the day. But what I am going to say is that Disney Lorcana will, like I said, get a wider cross-section and more kids into it. So we should strive to have a more collaborative and communicative approach to playing those sort of games, so kids don't come in and then bounce right out of card games because they don't want to play against some fucking dickhead at the local store who's going to shove. Talk to your opponents and beat them through strategy and your ability to forward think and plan and play in spite of RNG. Don't beat them because they didn't say a singular word at the right time, or they didn't know how to stack a bag within a chain link, you fuck. I've been Vince, there's no PleasantKenobi on the internet. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I thought it was an interesting one about an emerging competitive scene, if you will, and I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta for now.